Well, welcome back, friends. It's Paul Thompson along with Steve Autrey. It is May 24th, and we're getting ready to do you all a big favor. We're going to make this the last week of our podcast for a while. We're always delighted to be able to do these. We have so much fun doing them, and we do hope and pray that there's some benefit and blessing to you in these. But today we're going to take on what I think is a really important subject, and something that I hope that you will receive in the spirit that we want to bring it. When you start talking church, almost immediately you think that it's connected in some way with conflict. And so today we want to explore what some of Jesus' teaching around conflict, the inevitability of conflict, and how we're supposed to go about dealing with conflict in the church. Steve, you ever had any conflict in any church you ever served?
Never.
Never?
Not in the last 2 minutes.
I have conflict with everything you're doing right now, so.
Yeah. Well, see, evidently Siri has 2 minutes.
Has conflict too.
Don't know where that came from. It's fascinating to me when you look at Scripture. Again, we talked a little about creation last week. How long does it take us to get into conflict?
So by chapter 4 of Genesis, we've already got murder.
Right.
We've already got murder. Cain has already murdered Abel.
Yeah. 4 chapters in.
4 chapters in.
So 4 chapters in, you think about Adam and Eve have found themselves in conflict with God because they disobey. And then it's remarkable that how quickly in the story things begin to fall apart.
By chapter 9, we've got Noah, in which God is repenting and wishing He had not even created humankind.
Yeah, like a face palm.
Yeah. Big,
giant, holy face palm of, really, people? Well, maybe you felt that way.
So conflict certainly is, we are no strangers to conflict. And I've often said the phrase, and believe it is true, that conflict is inevitable. With any relationship, doesn't matter, married relationship, parent-child relationship, work relationships, any relationship that we are in is prone to conflict. So we have to understand the inevitability of that. It's not that relationships are bad if they have conflict. Matter of fact, I think we can argue quite the opposite. Healthy relationships know how to deal in a healthy way with conflict. So, Steve, let's talk a little bit about conflict from Matthew's standpoint. Matthew is he uses the word for the church is used twice in the Gospels. One time in this Matthew chapter 18 around conflict, and so this whole idea of the conflict within the church, it's really a fascinating look to think about. How Jesus uses the church only twice, and then one time He uses in direct relationship when conflict occurs.
So in Matthew 18, it's interesting. The whole chapter starts with some conflict between the disciples because they want to know who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven.
Yeah,
like they're already. And again, I wonder what kind of frustration Jesus felt with them. Like, really, guys, you've been following me at this point almost 3 years. I'm heading to Jerusalem to face my death, and you want to know about how high up the seating chart you're going to be. But then in 1821, that word church is specifically mentioned. And Peter came and said to Him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Of course, Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times.
And so then going back to verse 15, this is that real reference to really talk about when another member of the church, Jesus says, sins against you, go and point out the fault when the 2 of you are alone. If the member listens to you, then you have regained that one. But if you are not listened to, take 1 or 2 others along with you, so that every word may confirm by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. If the member refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if the offender refuses to listen even to the church, let such a one be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly, whatever I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Again, truly, I tell you, if two of you agree on earth about anything you ask, it will be done for you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there among them. Goes back a little bit last week to the importance of community, where 2 or 3 are gathered, not just the isolated individual.
Right. It's absolutely the manifestation of community that manifests the work of God. I find this really, how many times do we disregard this? That, well, if a member of the church sins against you,
go find another church.
Find another church, or go talk about somebody in the back corner of the parking lot or under the shade tree. But it's hard. I have to say that in our friendship, one of the things I admire about your leadership and about who you are is you manage conflict for a pastor very well. It's one of the things that I think you have a giftedness for. What I find in myself is I can struggle with conflict because, and I'm not alone in that, many pastors struggle to deal with conflict. I've had to learn how to deal with conflict over the years, but it's not something I gravitate to naturally.
So I think most of you know my parents were divorced when I was 12, and we experienced a lot of conflict leading up to their divorce and then even a long time after that. And one of the things that I recognized, and this was through therapy and through counseling and through lots of other ways that you try to figure out how to grow as a human being, is that I was paralyzed often by conflict. If someone was in conflict, then and almost inevitably in my mind, somebody was going to leave. That's a kind of a self-revealing thing that's true.
Yeah, that somehow you failed.
I failed, and so the relationship will be over, or we're going to have a divorce anytime there's a disagreement in the church, in the workplace, in any kind of relationship. The worst thing to have is conflict. And after a while, you learn that not only is conflict not a bad thing, it's inevitable. And I have learned that you can only get to the depth of relationship once you've been in conflict.
And that's a hard thing.
Yeah, it's a hard thing.
It is, most of us want to avoid tension. We want to avoid pain. So we avoid conflict. And it's the opposite of that is there are some who they love conflict and they seek it out and they even create conflict because that's where they're most comfortable.
It's a way of asserting control.
Right.
It's like, I will create this chaos. I'll create this unwieldy situation so that I will maintain the focus through that, and you'll be put off.
And the church is often a very fertile ground for that type of personality because so many people come to church because they want to be good people.
Everybody's so nice. Yeah. Everybody's so wonderful.
And so
at church.
if someone comes in with a chaotic personality, they can often, thrive. Yeah. Because no one puts the stop to it. So those things can happen too. So again, back to the church. And we've probably gone on long enough for today's podcast. But I didn't set a timer, did you?
I did not, but we are at 9 minutes, and so this is a good place to kind of draw this up because we're going to come back to this tomorrow. I want to invite you to think about what Matthew chapter 18 says about conflict is inevitable. Jesus presumes conflict when he uses this language in Matthew chapter 18. It's not if, it's when the conflict is going to occur. So tomorrow we'll get into the nuts and bolts about how should we go about reconciling? How should we go about working through conflict in our congregations? We've certainly had enough of that going on in our United Methodist Church over the last little bit. So be thinking about conflict, how comfortable maybe you are or uncomfortable with conflict. And let's talk tomorrow about ways that we might manage that.
Thank you.